What's going on, everybody? This is Josh from Sorcerer Studios, and welcome to another Blender modeling video. Now, I thought for this video, because the Winter Olympics are upon us, that I'm going to make the Olympic Gold Medal in Blender, modeling and texturing. So, I currently have the website that shows all of the dimensions of the gold medal, and I'm on olympic.org, and it says here that the weight is 586 grams. Now, we obviously don't need that for Blender, but its diameter is 92.5 millimeters. So we do need to keep that in mind when making this medal. And also, as you can see, this medal has a pretty intricate design, as well as a pretty intricate texture. So we're going to have to keep that in mind when we're modeling it. So, without further ado, let's begin. So first, I'm going to make the actual cylinder that is the geometric shape of the medal. So I'm just going to select everything and delete it. And let's see, I currently have an image of the medal on my phone that I'm looking at right now. And as we remember, the diameter of it was 92.5 millimeters, but let's focus on that in a minute. So we have our cylinder right here, and we can make this a bit higher in resolution because this is a model. So let's make this, I would say, 75 vertices around the radius, and let's compress this down a bit. Here we go. So now I'm going to rotate this on the x-axis. Excuse me, I'm going to rotate I'm going to rotate this on the x-axis. There we go. I don't know how that didn't work, but there we go. So I rotated it on the x-axis, and now we need to get the scale of it. Now, as we said earlier, the diameter is 92.5 millimeters, and I currently have this reference, and so it labels the scale right here, and it says 1, 1, and 0.024. And I pretty much I imagine these in units of meters, or I just assume that it is 1 meter, etc. So if we were to get the diameter, we would have to set both of these to 92.5 millimeters. So we have 1 meter. Obviously, if we were to put 0.01, that would be 1 centimeter. And wow, that's really tiny. Okay, so now obviously 92.5 millimeters is greater than a centimeter, but it is still on this degree, so we are going to switch this to 0.0925, and we have that on the x-axis, and we are going to copy and paste this over to the y-axis. And there we go. So those are the general dimensions of our medal. And I believe we need to scale this a bit on the z-axis. I'm not specifically sure how thick it's supposed to be. Let's take a look at the image and see if we could find anything. So I'm currently taking a look on Google Images because that is the best place to look. And let's see. Okay, so it seems like we pretty much have good dimensions. I might scale this a little bit more. There we go. And since this is so tiny, I'm going to hit Shift-C to center its viewport. So there we go. Okay, so now we have the approximate dimensions of the thickness, and we have the exact dimensions of the diameter. So let's begin with putting some details on this. So as you can see, on the medal itself, we have the Olympic rings that are on the top left-hand corner. So I'm going to begin doing that. So first, I'm going to make a cylinder again, and this one, as far as vertices go, it doesn't have to be as big because these are going to be a lot smaller. I'll make this 35. How about that? So now I'm going to scale this down, and I'm going to rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees. And just so that we have a better view of where this is, I'm actually going to add a different material to it So I'm going to go over to the material panel and click new, and so I'm just going to name this Olympic Ring 1 because, as you know, the Olympic rings, with the Olympic rings, there are 5 of them, so we need to create a material for that. And as you can remember, because this is a gold medal, it's pretty much going to have the same color as the medal around it, but with a different texture. So there we go. So now I'm just going to move it over here, and I'm going to approximate where this first ring will be. And by looking at the image, it seems like the rightmost ring seems to align almost directly with the center of the medal. So I'm going to actually begin with the one on the right. So I'm going to hit Alt-G to bring it back to its center, and then it seems like the medal, or the ring, is a little bit upwards, and I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, something like this. Now, as you can see, the height, or the Y height, seems to be going into it, so I'm going to scale it accordingly. And okay, so we have the approximate location of the first ring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the object mode, and I'm going to name this just ring. Yeah, ring. Okay. So there we have it. Now I'm going to go into edit mode because this is obviously a ring and not a cylinder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this face right here. I'm going to delete this face right here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a modifier, and this modifier is going to be a solidify modifier, and this basically allows us to create the size of the ring as we want it. So let's see how big this ring looks like it is. Okay, it seems like it's a little bit bigger. That seems like a good size. So I'm going to hit tab, and obviously there will not be a ring on the other side of it, so I'm going to scale this on the y-axis and then bring this out a little bit so that the ring is showing. Okay, cool. So we have that now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the other rings, and we need to determine where on the medal they are. So let's see how we can do this. So I'm going to duplicate this ring, and I'm going to constrain it to the x-axis, and let's move it approximately. Let's see, I'm looking at the picture right now, and let's move it right here. Okay, so we have that. Well, actually, let's be exact with what we're doing. So I'm going to redo that, or I mean undo that, and I'm going to duplicate it again, constrain it to the x-axis, and let's see the exact number that we're moving it to. So I'm going to move it to approximately 0.0185, and I'm just going to type, oh sorry, negative 0.0185. There we go. Now we have to remember that number when we're duplicating it again. Negative 0.0185. There we go. So we have those medals now. So now what we're going to do is we are going to make the rings on the bottom. So I'm going to duplicate this again on the x-axis, and it has to be directly in the center, so I'm going to grab out a handy dandy calculator, and I'm going to divide 0.0185 by 2, and that gets us 0.09. Where did that go? Okay, let's try that again. Oh, my bad. It is 0.0185. 0.00925, and that is exactly in between the rings around it. So now we need to figure out how far down this ring is going to go. So let's see where this ring is going to be. So it seems like the center of the ring hits just about the bottom of the rings above it. So let's move this on the z-axis, and because this ring is symmetrical, we can always just move it by the same number that we moved it on the x-axis by, so negative 0.00925. And that should be approximately the location of the ring that's on the bottom. Now actually, just because I'm looking at the image, I'm going to move it up just a little bit because I believe that looks a little bit more like it. So now I'm going to duplicate this on the x-axis again, and once again I'm going to move it by 0.0185. There we go. Okay, cool. So we now have the Olympic rings on the medal. Now let's smooth out these rings a bit, because it looks like, according to the image I'm looking at, that the rings are a bit smoothed. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm looking at currently. But first, we need to apply the solidify modifier. So I'm going to select all of the rings and hit apply for each of them. And this basically means, whoops, okay, it seems like it only applied it for one, so I have to apply it for all of them. So let's do that real quickly. Okay, cool. So we have applied the solidify modifier for all of the rings, and that basically means that when I go into edit mode, it shows all of the faces that it got solidified with. Okay, very cool. So now I'm going to add a modifier, and I'm going to select the bevel modifier, and this basically adds a bit of a roundness to our ring. And let's see, we don't need it to be extremely rounded. I believe that's what we have. Let's see, so this number we need to remember, so let's make it 0.02 for width. Okay, and I just applied that modifier. Now I'm going to do the same for all of the others. 0.02, apply. 0.02, apply. 0.02, apply. And for the last one, 0.02, apply. Alright, so we now have the rounding of each rings on the medal. So I believe for this medal we are pretty much done with making the rings. But one thing that I've noticed is, looking at the ring, it seems like looking at the medal, it seems like the rings are a bit too small, and I just noticed that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to correct that just by enlarging the actual rings, and I'm going to do this by selecting all of them, and then I'm going to bring my the pivot point to the 3D cursor, and I'm just going to hit S so that it gets scaled. And let's see, I'm going to approximate this because I don't know the actual dimensions or the actual spots of the rings on the medal. So by looking at the image, it seems like the rings are approximately this size right. Whoops, there we go. This size right here. But as you can see, we need to scale it on the y-axis. So I'm going to bring the pivot point back to medium point, and then if I just hit S and Y, we will scale it back to its original spot. Okay, there we go. So it seems like we have the rings in good order. So now we are going to work on the back. Now, looking at an image of the back, it seems like we have two symbols along with the PyeongChang 2018 name, and then we have a bunch of rings on the back. So as I mentioned earlier, I said there weren't going to be any rings on the back, but I forgot that there will actually be rings right around this area on the back. And once again, I'm going to approximate where the symbols and the rings go, but let's get into it. So first I'm going to start off with the rings. I'm just going to make a new set of rings, and I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate. I'm going to right click to constrain its transform, and I'm just going to hit G to move it down here, and then I'm going to move it on the y-axis, and I'm going to move it down like that. But as we know, those rings are a bit big for the back, so I'm going to scale them down, and let's see if we can get this to look good. So let's see. So I'm going to move this a little bit up to the center, and I believe that is good for now. Maybe it could be even a little smaller. There we go. So I think that's good for now. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make the symbols that are on the back, and I'm going to begin that by making a cube, and this is a very big cube, and we're going to scale this down. Now I'm going to scale this on the x-axis and bring it over to its approximate location. Let's bring it up here. The text for the PyeongChang 2018 will be right there, so I'm going to focus on that later. But for now, I'm going to model this. So let's see. So I'm going to model this on the x-axis a bit more. And that seems like a good spot for it. Let's move it over to the left a little bit. Okay, there we go. So there's the first cube. I'll just call this symbol cube club. Why did I call it club? Symbol cube. I'll call it that for now. And we might want to make this a bit larger on the y-axis. Oh, my bad. A little smaller. And then we'll just move it up a bit on the y-axis, obviously. So there we go. There's the first cube. Now we're going to hit Shift D, and I believe I'm going to make a new material for this just so I can see it better. Symbol cube material. Okay, we have that. So now I'm going to duplicate this and move it on the x-axis, and this time I'm just going to approximate where it's going to be. It seems to be right above the center of the center ring. So there we go. And from looking at the image, it seems like it needs to be a little smaller. So I'm going to hit SX, and I'll say 0.9 for now, and I'll do the same with the other cube. And let's see what else we have to do with this. And I believe it has to be a bit small, a bit shorter too. No, actually maybe not. I don't think it has to be shorter. So let's make the top and bottom cubes for this. And we're going to duplicate this, right click to constrain it. And I'm going to hit R90 to make it horizontal. And now I'm just going to move it up here. And we'll move it somewhere right there. Now I'm going to scale this on the x-axis, or on its local x-axis, to make it its original size. And now I'm going to, let's see, I'll scale it a little bit on the z-axis as well. There we go. So now I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to constrain it to the z-axis, and I'm going to move it down a little bit. There we go. So that's the approximate shape of the symbol. And let's see if we have the scale pretty good. And it seems like the scale is looking good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of them, and I'm going to add the bevel modifier. Now, as I remember, it might only work with one of them. Yep, I was right. So looking at the image, I'm going to approximate what the width should be, and let's put 2 segments on this just because this is more of a precise shape. So let's see, 0.07, how about that? Okay, I think 0.07 is good. So now I'm going to add those to the rest, 0.07 and 2 segments, 0.07 and 2 segments, and 0.07 and 2 segments. So I'm going to apply all of those. Okay, there we go. So we have that symbol. So now we have to make the little star. And I apologize if these symbols have a significant meaning. After this video, I'm actually going to look up what the meaning of the symbols are, and I will let you know. But for now, I'm going to make the star that is up here. And it seems like, well, okay, it's not really a star, it's more of an asterisk, but with only 5 rays that are coming out of it. So I'm going to begin making that. Now, because there's 5 of them, we need to figure out what the angle of each one is, and we do that by dividing 360 by 5, and we will get 72 degrees. So that means when we make our cube again and we move it over here, let's see, I'm going to name this star side. I'm not exactly sure what to name it. The name doesn't really matter, but this is just for labeling. And I'm going to add a new material, star side. Okay, there we go. So let's take a look at the metal and see where it should be. So we need to figure out where the center is. Oh, actually, for reference, I'm going to make a cylinder, and this cylinder will show the center of where the star will be. So let's see. We should make it probably right here. I'll just give that a material. I'll call this temporary material, and I'll just make this orange, or not orange, I'll make it that color, like a brown cream color, just to show where the center would be. So I'll scale this down a bit, and this is the approximate center. I'm not specifically sure where the center is currently, but let's try to figure that out. So I currently have one side of it, or one ray of the star, so I'm going to move that to its center approximately, and let's see what the size would be. Oh, actually, because the angle is 72 degrees, I'm going to rotate this by -72 degrees, and I'm going to move it right about here. Now, that is because I can better approximate where the center will be. So, looking at the image, I'm going to move this right about here, and that will give me a better estimate as to where the center will be. And it seems like the center is right above the top of this cube right here. So let's see how good we can make this. Okay, it doesn't seem to align perfectly, but there might be certain dimensions that I'm not exactly aware of. For example, the angles might not be 72, but I'm just using 72 because that is what 360 divided by 5 is. And that's what we're going to go with for now. Okay, so we have this side. So now we are going to duplicate this, constrain it there, and we are going to rotate it by 72 degrees so that it's straight up, and we're just going to move it right here. We're going to duplicate it again, rotate it by 72 degrees, and we're going to move it to its center. Duplicate it again, rotate it 72 degrees, and move it to its approximate center. And for the last one, duplicate, and for you guys who don't know, duplicating is Shift D and right clicking to constrain it, and I hit R to rotate it, and I'm going to select or type in 72 again, and we'll bring it to its approximate center. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure if these are the exact dimensions of this particular shape, but we have it pretty close. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the bevel modifier again, and let's see how much this should be done. So let's see, let's say 0.011. Let's see, nope, let's try 0.11. Okay, that seems to be pretty good. So let's apply that. We'll put 0.11 for that. Hit apply. 0.11. Apply. 0.11. Apply. And 0.11. Apply. So there we go. So we have our shape. Now, as you can see, there is something in the center there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to join all of these sides by hitting Ctrl J, and I'm going to do something that I typically do not do. I'm going to basically delete everything in the center and then just fill in the gap. Now, from a game dev perspective, which is what I do most of the time, I would not recommend this, but in this instance, I believe, since this is modeling and this symbol specifically on this metal is so small, we will barely even notice it. So I'm going to delete the faces, and as you can see, there are a ton of faces on the inside, so I'm just going to get rid of the internal geometry. And there's still some internal geometry, but it's not as bad as it used to be. So now I'm going to go out of edit mode, and I'm just going to add a cylinder to fill in the hole. Now there are definitely better ways of doing this, but for the instance of this particular symbol, which it's so tiny that this is literally as far in as we can zoom in Blender, which is kind of crazy. I just noticed that, so I'm just going to use a cylinder to fill this in. Now, if you're going for complete photorealism, I would not recommend this, but because we're making certain approximations, I'm just going to fill this in with a cylinder, and it will barely be noticeable when we actually zoom out, and I'll show you what I mean in just a second. So I'm going to add the star side material, and as you can see, you can't even notice it when looking out. So we have that now. Okay, so now we have made the star, and let's see what else we need to put on this metal. Okay, so we do need to put the text on it now, so that's what we're going to do. So to add text, we're just going to hit Shift A, and then as you can see, the text shows up right here, and the text is very big, but we can fix that later. But to edit this, we just have to go into edit mode, and as you can see, when we go into edit mode, we are actually able to edit the text because of this white bar. So we are going to type PyeongChang 2018. Oops, 2018. There we go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to extrude this a little bit, and if we go into the text window here, and we go to extrude, we can make this a bit bigger. So there we go, we have made that. Now I do understand that this is a trademark, that there is a trademark above the 2018, and I'll just make a disclaimer, I do not own this I obviously do not own this trademark, so that is my disclaimer. So okay, so we have our text, and I'm going to go back into object mode, and as you can see, the text is way bigger than it should be, so I'm going to scale it down. I'm going to hit Shift C to bring our view back to the metal, and we need the text to be right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this RX 90 to align it with the metal, and I'm going to scale it on the x-axis by -1, so SX -1. So now we need to bring it into view with the back, and we obviously need to make it even smaller. So let's see where on the metal this is. So it seems like the text, whoops, hang on, there we go. So it seems like the text is approximately smaller than this actually. And let's see, so based on what I'm looking at, the text is actually a little bit longer than it is. Now, as you know, the font is not exactly the same font that's on the metal, but I've realized that the default font in Blender is pretty close. It's not exactly the same, but it's as close as we're going to get without having to download a different type of font. So let's just align this to where it approximately is. And okay. So that's a pretty good approximation to where it is. Let's add material to this, and I'm just going to add the same material as the Olympic ring because this is gold, and it's pretty much going to be the same thing. Okay, so there is our text. So now the last thing we have to do for actually modeling the cylinder of the metal is by putting the text of the sport up here. Now, I am not exact. Now, there are a lot of sports that we can do, so I'm going to let you choose a sport. And for me, I'm just going to write sports, and I'll let you choose what sport you want to have, just for fun. So I'm going to make the text by doing the same thing we did for the previous text, RX90 SX -1, and I'm going to bring this over here. I'm going to scale it down even more. And so if you don't know, the text for the sport that it is up here. So I'm just going to leave this right here, and I'm going to, if I could find it, there we go. I'm going to give it the same material as the Olympic ring. Now, one thing that I probably should have done was I probably should have just made Olympic ring, star side, symbol cube. I should have made those all the same material because it's pretty much all gold. Oh, actually, one thing I just realized is that this text is actually, it appears to be engraved inside of the metal, but since we're not actually putting the sport, we're not going to worry about that for now. Okay, so we have everything for the symbols on the metal. This is quite a simple metal actually. It's a bit more simple than the previous medals of the previous Winter and Summer Olympics. So good, so we have that. So now we're going to make the little handle where the neck strap goes on. I'm not sure if I said that right. But we are going to add a cube, and to your surprise, I'm just going to delete, no, I'm not going to delete it. To your surprise, I'm going to go into edit mode and delete the cube. So now we just have an empty game object, and I'm going to add another cube. Now, in case you're wondering why am I doing this, I am going to bring this cube over here. Now the actual transform of the cube is in the center, but because we moved it in edit mode, the pivot point doesn't change. So if I were to rotate it, it rotates around the metal. But that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I'm going to add a mirror modifier so that whatever we do on this side also happens on this side. So very cool. We have now applied a mirror modifier. So now I'm going to adjust the shape of this metal, or of the handle, and I'm going to move it to approximately where it looks like it should be. So let's see, I think this is a pretty good place, and I'm going to scale this on the z-axis a little bit. And let's see how that looks. Now one other way that you can do this, if you really want to get ambitious with the modeling, is you could just take one of the sides on the cylinder of this metal and you can extrude it, but the extrusion has to be on the z-axis. So here, I'll show you how to do that. So you extrude, right click, press G to move, and hit Z to constrain it to the z-axis. And we have this side going up now, but this face is rotated awkwardly, so we need to hit SZ0 to make the Z scale of it 0. But for texturing purposes, I'm not going to do this because the detail of the UV unwrapping of our texturing might be a bit complicated. And because this is kind of a simple tutorial, I'm just going to leave it with making a different object. Okay, so continuing with what we were doing, in edit mode, I'm going to approximate how tall this should be, and for now I'm going to say probably around here, and I obviously need to constrain, or I need to scale this on the y-axis, so something like this. There we go. And now I'm going to make a loop cut because we need to make a connection between the middle. And before we start this, I'm going to hit or click on clipping, and you'll see why I'm doing that in a second. And I'm going to make a loop cut by typing in Ctrl R. And so basically, a loop cut basically just creates a loop that's a bunch of faces around the particular object that you are making. So if I hit Ctrl R, you can see there's a pink, I'd say, wrapping of sides around the object, and I can put this wherever I want, but I'm going to put it here, and I left click, and I can move it up, and let's see, I'm going to left click approximately here because that's where it looks like it is. So now I'm going to select face mode. I'm going to select this face, and I'm not sure if it's rotated correctly. So I'm just going to hit SX0, and it seems like it was. I wasn't sure why it wasn't, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit extrude by typing the E key, and I'm just going to move this to the center. Now here's where clipping comes into place. Let's say I had something right here and I deselected clipping and I move this, it would just keep going and they would not merge, but clipping makes it so that they merge right at the center. So there we go. So there is our little handle for the, I'd say, necklace strap of the metal, and I'm going to add a bevel modifier to it. And I'm not specifically sure if the actual metal is beveled, but from the picture that I'm looking at, it looks like that might be the case, just a little bit. So I'm going to hit apply on the mirror modifier, and I'm going to hit apply on the bevel modifier. So as you can see, we now have the handle of our metal. So now the final part of the modeling is I'm going to make the strap, and let's see what we can do with that. So let's make a cube, Let's move it down, let's make it smaller. And let's see what we can do here. So I believe what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the 3 key. I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to make a loop cut down the center. So as you can see, we have a little loop cut there. And I'm going to hit Z to go into wireframe mode. I'm going to select this entire side, and no, I'm going to select this entire side by hitting B and then box, and I'm going to delete the vertices. That basically gives us a half cube. And I'm going to now add another mirror modifier. And instead of on the x-axis, I'm going to do it on the y-axis. So there we go. And for this purpose, I'm going to leave clipping off for now. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to, well, stay in wireframe mode. Let's experiment with this. Let's see. So as you can see with clipping, it separates the actual mesh instead of keeping them merged. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the entire object that we have, and I'm going to move it up here. I'm going to scale it on the y-axis so that it has a thin cloth-like shape. I'm going to move it approximately to where it is supposed to be. Now, as you can see, we don't have any faces on this side, so I'm just going to hit Alt right-click on one of the sides, and that will basically loop around the entire face and basically make the loop. So now I'm going to hit F to fill in that side. So there we go. So now I'm going to go back into wireframe mode, and I'm basically just going to wrap this around here so that it wraps around the handle. So I'm going to hit extrude, I'm going to hit G, rotate, and I'm basically just going to keep doing something like this. So in this case, I'm going to hit extrude, right click to conform it, and then I'm going to hit GY to bring it towards the center. Now we want to turn clipping on again, and that's because we want them to merge at the center here. So cool. So now we have it wrapping around the handle, but now we want it to go all the way up and loop back down. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go back into wireframe mode, and let's see, how can we do this? Let's make a loop cut down here so that when we move this up like this, it keeps its position down here. So let's see, I'm not specifically sure how tall this should be, but I'm going to approximate once again. So I'm going to basically move this up, and let's approximate how big this is going to be. So okay, that seems like a pretty good size. That's something I like. So now what I'm going to do is, as we can see, it seems like, according to the strap that I'm looking at, that there is blue on the outside of the strap and there is red on the inside. So I take that back. Based on the Google images that I'm looking at, there are a bunch of different designs, and from the making of this video, we're not exactly sure what the actual design looks like. So for now, I'm just going to keep it blue on the outside and red on the inside. So just to add a little bit of a style to it, I'm going to basically move this over to this side, and I'm going to, let's see, how are we going to do this? Okay, I'm going to apply the mirror modifier so that we have freedom to work with this side, and I'm going to move this side over here, and that gives us access to look at both sides of the strap. So now, how are we going to combine these? Well, I'm going to select this, and I'm going to extrude it up, and this will take a bit of precision, but I'm going to try my best. So I'm going to extrude again, hit G, and let's see how good we can get this to look. So let's go back into wireframe mode and select this. Do the same thing with this. Extrude, hit G, extrude, hit G. Okay, so the main focus is to have these two sides combined. So I'm going to select both of the sides, and I'm going to select both of these, and I'm going to begin scaling them towards each other. So SY. Okay, this doesn't seem to be looking good so far. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take everything on the top and I'm going to scale it on the Y. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, let's see if we can make this look a bit better. So we're trying to combine, okay, there we go. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge the vertices on the top, and I'm going to do that by selecting both, hitting Alt M, and we can merge them at the center. And this automatically removes doubles, if you were wondering. Basically doubles is having two vertices in the same place. Now we need to do something about this as well. Let's kind of play around with it and just see what we can do. Well, okay, this does look a bit weird at the top, but if we look at it from front view, it doesn't look too bad, except for this side right here. It's just because what we're working with is so thin that sometimes we can see the other side from the front side. It's kind of hard to explain, but if we're looking at actual dimensions of it, we would be able to show that these sides are really okay. So I just modified just this face a little bit just to make it look better from the front. But as far as a basic modeling perspective, it seems like we're doing a pretty good job on the strap. Now, one thing that I'm realizing is that it really doesn't look too good from the top. So I'm going to modify it a bit, and let's see what we can do. I kind of messed up on the top. So let's see if we can have a happy ending to the top here. So what I'm doing here is I selected the sides on the top and I enabled proportional editing to a smooth fall off, and that basically smoothly edits the vertices around it. So let's see if we can get this to look better. So if we go into wireframe mode, select these. Alright, so I see what the problem might be. SZ0. Okay, so if we were to move these up a bit, and then we were to move everything up here up a bit. Okay, that's looking a little bit better, except for whatever is going on here. So let's see if we can fix that. I'm going to turn off proportional editing. Okay, so that was pretty much just a task of moving that out just to make it look like it has thickness. So now let's see what happens if I move this up. Okay, so I see what the problem is. There is only one side here, so we can't really extrude this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these vertices here, and I'm going to merge them at the center. First, I need to delete these two faces because that would create internal geometry. And let's see how this looks after we do this. So these vertices are very close together, so I have to zoom in. So I'm going to hit Alt M, merge them at center, and Alt M, merge them at center. So cool. So now we actually have two sides to work with, and it seems like these faces are too thin, so I'm just going to move them out a little bit. Okay, so let's see, how can I approach this? So I believe it might just look good if we just move this up a bit. And let's see what happens if we add a loop cut. Okay, that doesn't seem to make it look too much better. But I believe for now this is a pretty good representation of what the next strap looks like. So there we have it, the PyeongChang Olympic Medal modeled in Blender. Now, unfortunately, I don't have time in this video to texture it, but if you want me to, please comment in the comment section, and if I get enough comments, I will texture it in a future video. But without further ado, thank you so much for watching this. Have fun watching or competing in the Olympics, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.